All right. Okay. So welcome, everyone. You are here at the Advancing Educational Success for Under-Resourced Students and How You Can Help. This is a jointly presented program by YANA, particularly the YANA Colorado chapter, and 1stGenYale. Now, we're very lucky this evening to be able to bring together Yale students, recent graduates. We've got faculty, nonprofit organization leaders, and all of them here to discuss and engage in conversation about the challenges and opportunities for first-gen low-income college students, both at Yale specifically and in higher education generally. I think I'm getting a little feedback here, so we're just going to make sure everything is on mute. If like my panelists could just put themselves on mute for a second until we're ready to go, just that'll affect the audio quality. Awesome, thank you. No problem. All right, so before I hand the screen and the microphone over to our moderator, Professor Seth Zimmerman, I just wanted to say thank you to several people. First of all, Lisa Chapman, raise a hand, and the entire 1stGenYale team. We have our Colorado YANA chapter, Liana, Michael Mazer, and Rachel Tibbetts, who's not on. Michael, do you want to say a quick hello, since this was really, the idea came out of the YANA Colorado chapter?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rachel. As Rachel said, I live in Denver, I'm the co-chair of the Colorado chapter, and trying to think about with YANA, how do we have meetings and do productive things when we can't, in a COVID era, when we can't get together. We've had a bunch of webinars before, so this was sort of a collaborative effort in terms of just brainstorming, and we're happy sort of that Lisa, we pulled Lisa in at 1stGenYale, and sort of excited to have this program. Hope everybody enjoys it. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And I'm sure if you're in Colorado, nobody in Colorado, you should definitely stop by. We've got a lot of representatives and great work out there. And thank you to Michael and your team for working for us. All right. So again, back to our program here, a couple of logistics. I also wanted to say, in addition to YANA Colorado, our board, our financial supporters, everyone for making this programming possible, for doing it for free. Thank you to all of us for watching us, continue to support YANA and to allow us to help you and the social impact community. Quickly on logistics, I will be stepping off the screen and we'll be monitoring the Q&A and chat function. So if you have anything from very detailed questions, if you forget, is this going to be recorded or can you pass something along, I will do that. I'm not going to redo everyone's bios, but I will drop the bio document in the chat box as soon as I'm finished. So you'll have it in front of you if you didn't retain it from the registration program. Or the sign up form. The video will be sent out via email link after the program to all registrants. So even if you have to leave early or someone who wanted to see it, you'll have an email. And of course, within a week, we have all of our videos archived and downloaded and saved to our YouTube channel. And I'm sure 1stGen will have it there as well. So I do want to turn it over to our moderator. First, let me do a quick introduction. Professor Seth Zimmerman is an associate professor of economics at the Yale School of Management, where he studies labor economics and public finance, with a focus on the economics of education, determinants of educational attainment, and how education systems contribute to upward mobility, income inequality, and growth. Really interesting area. Professor Zimmerman received a BA from Dartmouth, and I think 1 or 2 masters and a PhD from Yale. He then wandered off the path and he went to do research at places like Princeton and Microsoft and University of Chicago, Booth School of Business, until he returned to the light and truth of Yale as a faculty member at the School of Management. So we're very happy that he came back to and stayed at Yale. Professor Zimmerman has been a tremendous moderator for both YANA and 1stGen in many of our programs, and we welcome him back and give him a good listen. So thank you very much, Seth. I will go offline and the microphone is all yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Rachel. And thank you so much to all the panelists for being here. It's my pleasure to be here. So I wanted to just kick things off by setting the scene a little bit before hopefully getting out of the way and letting our panelists speak about their activities and their experiences. But let me start again by setting the literacy, essentially to help develop and put them to use regardless of their family background. Now, what this looks like in practice depends on where in the education system you sit. At the most selective institutions like Yale, which is sort of what brings us together today, it's the institution that we're sort of centered on here. What this means is identifying talented and high achieving students from diverse backgrounds, recruiting these students so that they come to Yale or to whatever your institution is, and designing institutions that help or allow these students to succeed while they're at Yale and flourish when they leave. Now, places like Yale have some big advantages in taking on these challenges. One of them is just the immense resources they can apply to the problem. This shows up on the financial aid side. It shows up on the alumni side. You can build out services within the institution. You can draw on these alumni resources inside and outside the institution. And Yale has made some real progress on this front, and it's happening right now. So the share of Pell eligible students, so these are students who are eligible for Pell Grant, which is a form of federal financial aid that goes mostly to lower income students, that's grown by something like 50% at Yale since the mid-2010s to almost 20% of students. And the goal is to hit that 20% number by 2025. In the decade before that, the share of graduating students with loans fell sharply. So Yale is bringing more lower income students to campus, and they're reducing the cost of attending for people who are there. At the same time, a disadvantage that Yale and places like it face is that historically, at least, they're not really designed with lower income students or students unfamiliar with the college environment in mind. So for the first 250 years Yale was around, it mostly served boys graduating from a pretty small number of East Coast private schools. And as recently as the class of 2013, only 2% of Yale students came from families in the bottom 20% of the income distribution, compared to 70% from the top 20% and 20% from the top 1%. So there's more kids from top 1% families than from the whole bottom to roughly 60% of the income distribution. And this is important, right? What the research shows, this is what I spend my time doing, is that coming into these traditionally high income, high status environments is a real opportunity, but also poses some big challenges, academic, social, and personal, that can shape one's college experience and beyond. And so today we're going to be hearing from Yale affiliates about their experience navigating these issues and about their leadership on the policy side and thinking about what solutions look like at Yale and more broadly in higher education in the US. So let me get started now. I want to start by posing a question for Ellie and Nick, who are our most recent Yale grads on the panel. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, about your experiences at Yale?
Sure, I can start off. So I grew up in a rural low-income community in northern Michigan of about 500 people, so a very small town. My mom worked as a ski instructor and my dad wasn't part of the picture. So I think like coming to Yale was obviously a big change because there were not very many people who came from communities like mine, or families like mine, or socioeconomic backgrounds like mine. And so I think that, I think it was definitely a challenge. I think socially, it was also a challenge academically in a lot of ways because I went to school in a district where to get A's, you really didn't need to try that hard. And the standard for, passing, like I thought that I wanted to major in the natural sciences or maybe biology and go to med school afterwards. And so like in my high school, like biology was like a class that you could test out of basically based on your just general knowledge of the way the human body works. And I did in fact test out of biology in high school. I never had to take it. And so like going into my biology 101 class at Yale was quite a shock. And I think there were a lot of things like that I felt like I was very much in over my head when I first arrived. And it was a challenge for sure.
Nick, are you there? If not, let's.
Yeah, sorry about that. Had to fix some lighting issues, but absolutely echo a lot of what Ellie said already. Also guilty as charged, grew up in a rural area. single mom, and my high school never sent anyone to Yale before. So I certainly I think was prepared academically for it. And socially, it was difficult too, relating to even, I think it's often the implicit differences that we sort of browse over, travel plans, getting to, go to different countries, or experiences that are able to be, bought with people that have more privilege and access to resources, I think was something I had never really thought about. And I think really showed up most when I first, interacted with people at Yale. I mean, for the most part, though, I want to give, my peers credit. Obviously, I think as we've expanded the community of Pell Grant recipients of FGLI students, a lot of the students have been more aware of class differences and really respecting those kind of things. But I think that certainly socially it was hard to adjust. And then academically, luckily, I was able to do the first FSY program during the summer before I got to Yale, and that really helped me prepared academically to take advantage of resources. But even still in that, coming in, I think having been used to speaking a lot in class and having good relationships with my teachers in high school, going from that to then on, suddenly I'm in a seminar with all these other peers who are just like so eloquent and, have read things that I couldn't even, think about reading, and just feeling very paralyzed by that feeling of, imposter syndrome and not, wanting to make a mistake or feeling like I don't have something to offer. And so that made things difficult to, go to office hours. And, I was like, what? And all those things really compound and academics. And the good thing is, I think as with anything, time helps. And so I was able to really, I think, have a great. Oh, is my audio?
We're having a little bit of some audio hiccups there, but it seems to have recovered.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll just wrap up with saying I think those were things that I felt most acutely during my first semester, maybe first 2 semesters, and still to this day. But I think as I've made friends and we've shared our trials and have been able to sort of have community together, I think that's really helped to not feel so alienated, not to feel like an imposter, to know that I belong there. And it's credit to folks like Lise creating 1stGenYale and some of the other clubs as well.
Right. So looking back on it now, are there things that either of you wish you had known, advice you would have given yourself when you arrived at Yale that you think would have been helpful?
I think one thing for me is maybe not being like ashamed of who you are. Like, I think it really took me a long time. I think when I first arrived at Yale, I felt a lot of pressure to try to fit in with everyone else's life experiences when mine were in fact very different. And so I would either stay silent, when people were talking about, the trips that they went on, or, I don't know, the food that they ate that I never had heard of before, or, the things that they had learned in their classes. Like, I would just kind of sit there silently and think that I didn't have anything to offer to that conversation. And I think it took me a few years really to like find my voice and find that, even though I didn't have the same resources growing up, I had a whole set of experiences that my peers didn't have that, could also benefit them in some way to hear about. And so I think I would want to go back and like, I don't know, be a little bit more true to myself maybe for the first couple of years.
Were there any experiences at Yale or at home that sort of helped you come to that realization, I guess, that you can highlight or that come to mind?
I think for me, it was a combination of, I think, I don't know, you just gain self-confidence over the time that you're there, and you start to receive, positive feedback in little ways. You get a good grade on something and you're like, oh, I'm actually, I am smart, and I actually like can do this work, and I actually do have something to say here, and things like that. But I think it was also kind of like finding my niche. Like I said, I tried to start off in biology because that was really the only path I knew that people took who had like happy, successful lives where they made enough money to live were like doctors, because there weren't really other like professionals in my community. I think yeah, so I think I came into college thinking like, oh, well, I'll be a doctor because I'm going to college, and that's like what you do if you go to college, you become a doctor. And I think that just wasn't the best fit for me, for my interests or my abilities. And then I eventually found like kind of a niche in like global affairs and development studies and stuff. And so I think once I found like my area that I was more comfortable, absorbing the material in, I felt like I could give back a little bit more and could be myself a little more.
Right, that makes sense. Nick, is there anything, I know you're a little closer to it now, but looking back to when you started, is there anything that you feel like that you would have liked to tell Nick? And way back in 2020, do I have this right? 2021?
I know he was so young. I think the most important thing I would say to him is like, don't let the dream overwhelm the reality. I think, and coming from backgrounds like ours, fixating on places like Yale and getting there is, and then once you're actually there and you've had conceptions of what it's going to be like and you have this big dream, I think you feel the pressure to get the most out of the experience as you can. And I think that pressure can be overwhelming. And I think the most important thing is to have patience with yourself. I think build routines and stick to those that are outside of Yale, because I think Yale can be an overwhelming place and gives a lot. It totally gives a lot. But
And
I
Nick,
think
we're losing you a little bit with your Wi-Fi
also
audio.
be afraid to take some space from Yale. Is have a run in who you are, and it'll make you more successful. Oh no, can you hear me okay now?
We're still having a little bit of trouble, but you're mostly there.
Okay.
Before we move on and sort of bring in our other panelists, I wanted to pose one more question to Ellie and Nick. Of course, we'll continue to as we move through. But one thing that people often highlight when they're talking about the transition to Yale and the navigating their time, at institutions like Yale, is about sort of a tension potentially between their experience at Yale and their life at Yale and their life at home, which as you've pointed out is quite different, and potentially than your life at school. Is that something that you guys have dealt with at all or not? And if so, how?
The tension between life at home and life at school.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel that going back and forth is challenging, for example?
Yeah. I definitely felt that way. I felt like for a long time, and in some ways still, I mean, at this point, I'm 6 years out of college. And
at some point you lose count.
Yeah. And in some ways I still feel that way. I think my friends from home and my family could only relate so much to the experiences I was having at Yale and the things I was struggling with. And in some ways, like, you talk about like the struggles that you have as kind of like part of the pseudo upper class, like at Yale. And you tell, your friends and family from home who are like really struggling with like the daily challenges of like paying rent and like, getting food and like getting to their job because their car broke down and like having children like most of my friends had children at the point that I was going to college. And so like, you sound a little bit ridiculous to be like, oh, I feel out of place in my class and, things like that. And so I think there was a challenge relating in that direction. And I think, similarly, when I was worried about things that were going on at home or in my family life or, I think my friends at Yale like couldn't necessarily relate to those things. And that I kind of lived in this like in-between space where I wasn't really part of either, set of people. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a constant challenge of like ascending through, socioeconomic classes, and something that I very much like continue to grapple with all the time.
Yeah. Nick, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, assuming your Wi-Fi is engaged.
Yeah, it definitely cut me off of it if it becomes unengaged, but I do have a thought on this. I think financially is something that can be tough at school. I worked, several and working several jobs at school and trying to find the balance between saving for, do I save for things like spring break? Do I get to, go off with my friends on breaks, or should I save that money, or should I send it home? And I've sort of done, I've done all three. I've had to send home, money at some points. I've tucked some away, and I've also got to enjoy, thankfully, some breaks with friends as well. So I think it's, I don't think I have the balance done, right quite yet, but I think that's something that is very hard to strike without feeling guilty or without feeling stressed about money for the future for your family. So I think that, yeah, that is always in the back of my mind.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, a good transition point. So let's turn now to some of the programming that Yale and Yale alumni have put together to try to support first generation and low income. So Nick before mentioned the acronym FGLI, that stands for first generation and low income, for those of you guys who may not have heard that before. In any case, Lise, can you tell us about your work with 1stGenYale, what you do, what your goals are, and so on?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. I'm Lisa Pfeiffer Chapman, class of '81 MBA from the Yale School of Management. And in 2015, during the Halloween incident, we realized that many of the first-gen low-income students who were protesting really had other issues they were also protesting quietly. Being first-gen and low income, they come to Yale being underrepresented as well as being underprepared. And many of the services at the time weren't really meeting their needs. So I was getting a master's in counseling. I was chair of the alumni board. And I thought maybe there's a way we can help. Maybe there's a way we can bring alumni together with similar backgrounds who were in their shoes, literally, at Yale, and get them together to share and tell their stories. So it's their stories. Everybody has different stories. They're coming from different backgrounds, but maybe setting up a program and a networking opportunity would help these students know that they belong. They belong at Yale. They're part of Yale, but they may need a little bit more help and support and guidance throughout their 4 years at Yale and also post-Yale as alumni. What we alumni know really well, that being admitted to Yale is a fabulous opportunity, but it's not enough. You don't just go to Yale and 4 years later, bye, see you later. You really, and being first and low income, you have to figure out your own strategies and how to take advantage of the resources at Yale. And they're all different for different kinds of people. But having alumni get together in structured programs, we've had over 30 in the last 2 years via Zoom, for example. Prior to that, we had a conference in 2018 and many programs on campus focusing on developing professional skills, many focused on career and life skills, because while Yale focuses on academics and there's a very strong Office of Career Strategy, we think the students benefit from hearing the stories, the challenges, the opportunities alumni have gone through to find their jobs, find their careers, go to graduate school. What skills do you need to be admitted to graduate school? What kinds of summer experiences are important? And really, alumni to students can actually have that dialogue and that discussion. And when we get together, even on Zoom, and an alum's talking to a student's an alum, and different backgrounds, Nick's in New Hampshire, Ellie's in Los Angeles, Mike's in Colorado, we get together and talk, and one person is one race, one culture, one nationality, one religion. The barriers come down because people realize we have something in common. And so 1stGenYale tries to do that. We want to help our students navigate. I mean, Nick and Ellie talking about pressures from home. Many of them have very acute financial pressures where they're sending money back home. They're working full-time jobs while they're students at Yale. And for example, with a full-time job, you can't take advantage of the master's T's or the head T's now. You cannot take advantage of programs at OCS that are in the afternoon. You cannot meet with companies who are coming to interview because you have a job. You have a paid job. So how do you work around those barriers? How do we get people together? And that's what we tried to do through our variety of programs run by a number of alumni. We have an executive board. We're a 501c3 now. I should say we started as a Yale Alumni Association shared interest group. And then we became a 503c3 about 6 months ago. And that's what we do. So I can answer lots of other questions, but we're here to help these students succeed, both at Yale and beyond. Academically, we help them. How do you seek help? Oh, many of the students are afraid to ask for help. They find it's a weakness. Actually, asking for help is a strength. And how do you do that? How do you go to office hours? Basic things that people who grow up in a family with parents who went to college for 4 years or graduate school or professional careers, they know how to do this. But many of the first-gen low-income students haven't had that opportunity. So we provide the bridge to help them, and we build relationships of trust. We get to know the students when they walk in the doors, first-year students. We're with them all the way for 4 years. We're with them in the summers, and we're with them as they become alumni. And we continue the journey, and we ask them to give back to others as we have given to them.
That's great. Just to sort of make it concrete, do you have an example in mind of a specific program or individual success story that comes to mind to sort of
Sure.
characterize this? I don't know, it might help people envision it a little bit better.
Absolutely. We have one we're living right now. And by the way, we're an all alumni group. We have an executive board with 7 members, and everything is done as volunteers. And we have a program that's now in its 3rd year called 1stGenYale Summer Bulldogs. We started 2 years ago with Professor Daniel Markovits from the law school. The pandemic broke out. Many of our students lost their jobs, lost their internships. Everybody was panicked. And we found out that OCS, Office of Career Strategy, has a wonderful program. Then it was called DSA. Now it's called SEA. And what it does is it provides $4,000 to students, Yale College students on financial aid for an internship, research in the arts, could be any field. And what we ended up doing in 4 days was helping 6 first-gen Yale College students secure that internship with Professor Markovits. That was 2000. Last year we did 44 students, with 70% of them at the Yale School of Public Health. So here are students who have great ideas. They want to go into medicine, they want to research, but these are Yale College undergrads. They don't have access to faculty in the professional schools. They don't have classes, they don't meet them, they don't know them. So we again act as a bridge, and we set up a program where we become the back office of the faculty member or the nonprofit professional. We get uploaded all the resumes, the transcripts, the cover letter. We connect it with the faculty. We have a team of alumni who are interviewers who help set up individual interviews with the faculty member or the sponsor. And we handle all the paperwork. We help the students work with the Fellowship and Funding Office. We help them with the OCS for the SCA. Last year, 44 students were funded $150,000 by Yale. So in 2 years, we've done 50 students funded by $175,000 by Yale. Right now, we are live in our program. The deadline for students is this Sunday, January 23rd at midnight. We have over 85 live projects from Yale faculty at other schools, and international positions in nonprofits, in economics, science, STEM, COVID, arts, you name it. Go to 1stGenYale.org and go to Summer Bulldogs, and you can see all the projects for the students. And we will again manage that process. We have over 60 alumni who have volunteered to run our interview program. So we're in the midst of doing that. And I can't be happier and prouder, because what we found, Seth, the problem we found that we thought we could help was that while funding is available, generous funding from OCS for the SEA program, many students, first-gen students, don't know how to access, where do you go for research? The funding is there, but how do you get the research to then apply for the funding? And we thought, well, if we could be that bridge and we could reach out to faculty, to deans, to other professionals, we want to do that and then connect the pieces. And that's the program we're doing, we're creating. We need students to apply. The deadline's coming up. Our 85 projects are absolutely amazing from all over the United States, and I think 7 foreign countries. So many of them are virtual. So please take a look at that. But we're really proud of our program. We're really proud of the support of YANA, who helped us promote our program with YANA's nonprofit members, and to the Yale community, to Nick Randos, who actually put out a word today for Questbridge and also for the YAM, the Yale, I'm sorry, Nick, I'm going blank here, for your student group, the advocacy group. So we've had a lot of success we work in partnership. So this is a partnership program and we're really thrilled. And Dean Chung, Janine Dames, Bridgie Howard, everybody's been behind us, helping us, and we're volunteers. All we're trying to do is be helpful for the students and the sponsors.
Thanks, Lee. So one thing that does jump out very generally at Yale and beyond is the importance of navigation and helping people navigate to existing resources, which it sounds like you're highlighting here. Nick, I know you've done some work with 1stGenYale. Can you fill us in a little bit on that work?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, a huge shout out to Lise and all the volunteers. I mean, they are incredible, and they've really made it. I think the FGLI community has been blossoming as more people have gotten on campus, and it's certainly been buoyed by 1stGenYale and all the opportunities that Lise and the team are creating. So absolutely can't go without thanking that team.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Nick. And I just want to say that from last year's program, 5 of the students, Yale College, financial aid, 1st-gen students, never had done research. 5 of them have been employed in the Yale School of Public Health. So they took their summer research project, and Yale School of Public Health found additional funding, either to pay for them or to give them academic credit, depending on what's going on. So really, shout outs from you, Nick, and others who are really, you're our ambassadors. So, and we want to do the best we can. So thank you.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, and under the 1stGenYale umbrella, Lise had come to me, I think at the beginning of last summer, to do a project on researching what different universities and colleges were offering their 1st-gen communities, and to sort of use that to compare to Yale and see where Yale could improve. And so I looked at over 250 universities and colleges and put together a report, and just some of the highlights I think I think in general, Yale does, I think has done a good job of providing resources to the FGLI community. I think financial aid wise, it's been very important, and it's possible. I'm only able to attend Yale because of the generous financial aid, and I think FSY was a huge buoy for me and the 70 other people that were in the class as well. But I mean, there's still obviously room to improve. I think some of the things that jumped out to me were other universities offered some sort of formal mentorship programs with faculty and within peers as well. And so putting together some sort of mentorship program, I think, could be helpful, as well as addressing a way to take the awesome curriculum that's offered at FSY, which is, I guess I should say, a 5.5-week program before you enter your first year for folks from disadvantaged backgrounds. And you get to learn a lot about how to use resources from Yale. I think turning that into a class that could be offered to all of the 1st-gen community, because it's only offered to 70 folks, and we're looking at probably around 300 or more in any given incoming class. And so making sure that discrepancy is mitigated. And and I think also, as Lisa touched on it, and I think 1stGenYale is picking up a lot of this slack, is making sure that we are creating more need-based fellowships and helping folks help guide folks through the summer process. Because every year I'm anxious about the summer process, including this one, and especially coming from a 1st-gen FGLI background, not having contacts, not having as much experience. I think ensuring that we have more support that way as well, and also wellness support, from financial support, helping folks budget and understand how much money they might need to have when they leave college, and also psychological support. I saw some colleges and universities that have specific teams for 1st-gen low-income folks, as we've seen between Ellie and I already. We have shared backgrounds and some shared experiences, and so having a team that's trained especially in helping folks navigate that as well. There are still room for improvement, obviously, and no university is going to have all. And when I was researching, no university had all of these things. But I think Yale has shown that it wants to commit to bring in more folks into the FGLI community, into Yale, and so I think as a student body, we can always continue to push them toward making it as as inclusive as possible.
Thanks, Nick. So that's actually brings us to the next question I wanted to pose, which is to Liana. So these issues related to bringing FGLI students, into full participation in the college experience, go way beyond Yale. And Liana, as those of you who have read the bios know, works at the American Indian College Fund. And I guess the question I would pose to her is, are there parallels that emerge here between what we're seeing at Yale and what you see in your work with a broader set of institutions?
Yeah, thank you, Seth, for that question. So yes is the answer. My work at the American Indian College Fund, which was started in 1989, our bread and butter mission is to provide scholarships for students. But since that time, especially in the last decade or so, we've become increasingly focused on how we respond to what we're seeing in terms of the entire education pipeline and how you really can provide support services to ensure success, whatever that means, along every step of that journey. Only 15% of Native students 25 years and older have a bachelor's degree, and that's compared to 32% of the overall population, so almost half. And 24.9% of Native students live below the poverty line, and that's compared with around 13% for the overall population. So what I'm saying is almost all of the students that we serve are in need, are under-resourced, are non-traditional students. We fund just over 4,000 students each year from 200 different tribal nations, and they attend school all across the country at around 200 institutions. Almost half of them are first generation, 54% are non-traditional, so over the age of 24. Over a quarter are single parents, over half work full or part-time. So you can see the kind of common themes between Ellie and Nick's experiences and almost every single scholarship recipient of ours. So with that in mind, the types of programming that we do are a huge range, but what I really want to focus on today is kind of those support services that we have developed to try and see at every step, from early childhood education all the way through graduation and cultivating, employable graduates who can achieve their goals for a meaningful career, what that looks like. So we have taken some time to look at the challenges that exist in Native communities, which are largely poor in rural areas. Many of those challenges, even before the pandemic, were things like food insecurity, housing insecurity, homelessness. And so, I think Ellie mentioned earlier that it was kind of difficult to have a connection with people back home when their primary focus is putting food on the table or, bringing home a paycheck and these kind of very basic needs. How do you prioritize education? And the other theme that we see, over and over again is this sense of belonging that I think both Nick and Ellie had to take time to feel confident in when a lot of students are first generation or they step onto a campus where they don't see a lot of people who look like them or come from similar backgrounds to them. How do you make them feel like they do belong there and that it doesn't distract from their academic experience in any way? So we have kind of a few different focus areas that our organization works on. One is pre-college, and I think First Gen does a lot of this type of programming too. So it's kind of getting in high schools or even before students are thinking about college to really try and promote a college going mindset. So we have summer camps. We are in touch with staff at high schools on reservations to try and engage students to provide them with kind of those sorts of expectations and how they can really prepare to pursue a college education if that's what they want. The obvious one is scholarships. So we try and help students overcome the financial burden by taking that out of the equation. In some of our scholarships, we have kind of tailored coaching services. So that's very individual. A lot of our students don't have mentors in their lives. They don't have families who can tell them how to navigate these experiences. So we have sets of coaches on our staff that do everything from text our students every week when they're in finals to sending them care packages to helping them figure out how to navigate financial aid and do all of those sorts of things during their academic career. And a lot of this work comes from research, both qualitative and quantitative, to try and analyze what results in the highest rates of persistence in graduation and retention. So not just getting through 1 year, but are they coming back in the fall? And why or why not? Is it because they have family at home that now they have to take care of? And how can we help them overcome some of those challenges? And then the last kind of piece of the puzzle is trying to match the intention of the education with becoming an employable graduate. So many of our students, almost all of them, enter college with a specific desire to change their community in some capacity. And a lot of them don't actually know how to translate their education into a career. And that's because they don't have someone to help them craft a resume, or like a lot of the work that 1stGenYale has done in helping find those internship opportunities and experiences that really set them up well. And also, they need to be paid, because our students can't afford to not work and take an unpaid internship. So we have a huge career readiness and employment program where we provide resources and coaching on how to find those opportunities. We have partners that are willing, to give our students training or experience or jobs or whatever that looks like. So that is a lot of information. And I think what I would say is that all of the things that Nick and Ellie have said are things that are consistent with our work, and really why we're here is to try and figure out how those who are under-resourced, what else they need that may not be as obvious, and how we can continue to be nimble as an organization and think beyond just financial support and really make the experience in higher education an enjoyable one, and one that everyone can see themselves in.
Thanks, Liana. That really, I think, broadens the perspective here, and I think what you say is very much borne out by broader quantitative and qualitative work on this topic, at Yale, beyond, and in various low-income communities. So one of the things that's interesting about this panel is that we have both people who are involved in designing and leading 1stGen programming, and also people who participated in it. I want to quickly, before we move on to concrete ways that people can get involved, just to have see if anybody wants to say a word or two about sort of gaps they've experienced in this programming, places they think it could be improved, and conversely, if people who are involved on the design side might have just a quick moment to mention one thing that they're one direction they're going with their programming.
Well, I can start in terms of gaps. I'll start with things I think were particularly helpful for me. I think socially, one of the biggest things that was helpful was having the QuestBridge student organization on campus. I was admitted to Yale through QuestBridge, which was I think I was admitted with maybe 16 other people at the same time. And so we had a little bit of a crew going in. And someone to navigate the waters of this new area with. So I think, social resources are really helpful. I think, summer funding has come up a few times. I was very fortunate to get funding from Yale that covered all 3 of my unpaid summer internships. But I know that not all 1stGen students are, able to do that. because there aren't that many fellowships for the summer, or, you know, scholarships, or however you want to phrase it. But so yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we've already touched on this, but need-based funding, like Nick was saying, and you know, other sources of summer support, I think, are something that's really helpful. Something that I saw as kind of a gap in programming was basically, I mean, Yale is seen as kind of, and schools like Yale are seen as kind of like the great equalizer of, you know, people who come in from different class backgrounds and leave like all at the same level. And that really did not comport with my experience. I mean, coming out of Yale, I took a job that paid $13,000 for the whole year. It was very hard to live, not having like the supplemental, you know, income from, you know, family sources and things like that. And I think, you know, Yale really encouraged, so the job was a Fulbright fellowship in Bosnia, and Yale really encourages students to, you know, do these things that are kind of like, you know, prestigious, like post-grad fellowships and, you know, or public service oriented program, you know, tracks, like when you leave. But for a lot of first gen students for whom those things really like speak to you, because you want to give back, because you know what it's like to grow up in, you know, a socioeconomic struggle. But those things are like really challenging to actually take advantage of in practice, because like you just, you know, it's hard to live. And so I think additional resources for students who are leaving Yale to kind of like set them off on, you know, a good path, a strong like financial path. Obviously that doesn't mean like Yale is supplementing like, you know, my $13,000 Fulbright up to like $100,000 or something, but like little like additional sources of support, I think would be really helpful. I think another thing, I think people don't necessarily consider all of the sort of other costs not related to your education that you like incur sort of incidentally. And the main thing that I thought of like when I left was like furniture. I didn't have you know, the money to like furnish a whole apartment. I, you know, between like paying for, so when I went to Yale, we had the summer income contribution. So I had to pay like most of the money that I was earning throughout the year back to Yale to cover the fact that I took an unpaid summer internship. So I, you know, I was between that and like, you know, sending money home or other expenses, like I didn't have a lot when I was leaving. And I, you know, I didn't have enough to like buy furniture. And so I think like alums who want to like support in other ways other than, you know, giving like large amounts of financial support can do things like, you know, donating things that are around their home that they don't use anymore. Like that would have been like immensely helpful for me. And actually I did have an alum who, you know, was able to help out with that, but it was through like a very informal mechanism. And I think thinking about those other things that like young adults need coming out of college to get on their feet, and how like, you know, this network can like support those needs is like a big thing.
Thanks, Allie.
I'll jump into your question, which is because we're volunteers and not Yale employees, we rely heavily on students. Students are our audience. Students are the people we want to serve. And we spend a lot of time listening. In our events that are in person and even on Zoom, we want to hear from the students. We want to hear what issues are concerning them and how are ways that we can work together to help them. Many of our work is around career related experiences, resume writing, workshops, interviewing, anything related to how to present yourself. Also, how to take advantage. Many of this first-gen low-income students cannot take advantage of extracurricular activities or leadership opportunities because of their outside work commitments. So we try to figure out a way, not just through our, you know, our program or programs in person, but we are mentors. All the alumni try to build relationships with students on a one-to-one basis where they're available by phone, by email, by anything at all. We have lots of students who we've helped over a long period of time. We also use cross campus, which is another resource at Yale for alumni and students, not just first gen, but all students and all alumni to connect and help students who want to help them directly. But we find that our students, you know, they find by meeting alumni who have shared similar experiences they can let their guard down. They can be who they are. The alum is who they are. No one's playing any games. We're not boasting, and we're saying, hey, this is what happened to me, and this is what I used to do. And they're like, that happened to me. So we try to be real. And we want the students to know, as Ellie said earlier, be who you are. You are who you are. You are going to be a big success in life. You're going to have bumps, and we're going to hopefully help you with strategies how to overcome those bumps. So Seth, in terms of your question, where are the roadblocks or what are the gaps? We see gaps all the time. And that's why we come in. We're nimble, we move around, we're kind of a hybrid in terms of where we fit at Yale. We're partners with everybody. We can create programs and run them that are helpful. We can adjust them, change them. And I think we can be a big resource to Yale and fit in to the resources in place and actually add additional resources to help that bridge.
Great. And that actually brings me to the final topic I wanted to turn to here before we give the audience a chance to ask, which is just how Yale alumni and other community members who are interested can get involved. So panelists, I guess, if there are people in the audience who want to help FGLI students at Yale, or who want to help expand access for FGLI students at Yale or other similar institutions, what would you recommend that they do concretely? Any ideas?
I'm sure I'll jump in. Start with something you love. You like working with children. You like working with senior citizens, like working with animals. Find something in your own community where you live and work that really touches your heart and soul. Something about it, where there's a need. Lots of wonderful programs from Boys and Girls Clubs, local Ys, schools, libraries. They're desperate for help. They're absolutely desperate for help on all sorts of levels. And what I recommend is start small. 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 1 hour, 2 hours, and let it build your experience. And if you have time and you're available, you may find yourself, like we did with 1stGenYale, with an idea, simply a simple idea of getting alumni and students with similar backgrounds together and help students succeed. Where we are today with over 3,600 alumni and students. So just start small, start with an idea, see how it goes, be nimble, be flexible, and you'll make a difference in your community and you'll feel great about helping other people.
Thanks.
I would like to piggyback on that. So I wear a couple different hats. I work with YANA and as an alumni volunteer, and I also work for the American Indian College Fund. And so I think Rachel will drop a link to so you can learn a little bit more about a fellowship that we have with a partnership with Dwight Hall, which is kind of the public service organization on campus. But I do want to echo what Lisa said and what Ellie was saying about that social and like peer-to-peer connection is really important. Your time and your expertise and your experience is one of the most precious gifts that you can give, and it's very actionable, it's very doable. I consistently volunteer to be a mentor to current undergraduates, to prospective students, and our organization is working on a personal and career mentorship platform that we've had for a couple of years now, so that students can access on their own terms, reach out to people based on whatever types of conversations they want to have. And you can really help them navigate things. You might think, oh, well, I didn't go through what they were going through, but there might be something that you have to offer and you won't really know until you try. So I really want to echo that mentorship thing, and it goes a lot further than you think. Having one person be there for you consistently can have a much bigger impact than you think. I do work for a nonprofit, so I am never going to say that donation does not make a difference, because that supports all of the programming and work that 1stGenYale does, that my organization does, that a lot of our YANA partners do. If you are involved in a service organization, or you think that you have something that would be useful to helping support students, reach out to Rachel. We always like to talk about those potential opportunities too. So those would be my plugs.
Yeah, I just want to jump in also, I think along the same lines of mentorship. I think one way that you can help, it doesn't have to feel too onerous, is helping with summer bulldogs or other sort of programs where if you know of, maybe you work at a place that could use interns or traditionally accepted interns, or have a network of peers that you can think of that would also be amenable to internships. I think that would be incredibly helpful to help FGLI students have access to that network. And also, yeah, mentorships, getting involved with either cross campus or with 1stGenYale, ensuring that, like Liana and Lisa have already said, like just the importance of talking to someone that's experienced Yale. It doesn't even have to have the same 1st-gen background. I think like having that commonality and also getting into the workforce, I think all of those things can be extremely valuable, and it doesn't have to necessarily feel like it's an onerous commitment.
Thanks, everybody. So Ellie, sorry, why don't you go ahead before I jump in here?
I don't know if I have anything else to add. I think everybody really covered it. I think just to elaborate on the mentorship perspective, yes, I think that's something that's super important. And another reason that it's important is like for students like me who didn't really know like all of the career options that are out there when they came into college. And I sort of fell into doing like development work, and now I'm like, and that like set me off on a path to do like human rights and law. And now I'm like, working like in the legal profession. And I think like it never occurred to me that I could be the kind of person who did that, and that those were like jobs that were really out there. And so, every time that you like explain your career path to someone, they see like a whole world of things that are possible that they didn't know about, because no one in their community growing up knew, did those things. And so that, has a lot of value in it. And I just want to underscore that point. But I think everything that everyone said is right and spot on.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
One
Seth,
thing
can I
that I
jump
wanted
in?
to highlight. Oh, sorry, Elise. Yes.
Yeah,
Sure, go ahead.
just going to jump in. One quick thought was for all the Yale alumni who are watching this incredible webinar. What we're also trying to do is create other opportunities to engage alumni. And our alumni base is not only 1st-gen low-income alums, but it's people who care. So we have a lot of alums. We have actually Yale trustees in our group who are not 1st-gen low-income, people who want to make a difference and want to help this group succeed now and beyond. So if you want to join us, come join us. I put information in the chat, but also for alumni, you can come be mentors with us. You can help be interviewers on 1stGenYale Summer Bulldogs. As Nick was talking about, offer your nonprofit or your academic position. We're actually on our 1stGenYale Summer Bulldogs, we actually have several for-profit companies. So in terms of where we're going in terms of opportunities, we're thinking about opening up a 1stGenYale for-profit internship program. So not funded by Yale, but funded by individual companies, because we're getting calls from companies saying, I want to hire Yale students who are 1st-gen low income. How do I do that? How do I connect? How do I find them? We can be the bridge to that.
Thanks, Lisa. So one thing I want to highlight, so Rachel has placed in the chat to everybody a link to the YANA Dwight Hall Summer Fellowship. So I'd encourage people who are interested to check out that as another way to sort of get involved here that maybe Rachel wants to say a word about here now.
Yeah, thank you guys. This is all great. I did drop it in the chat. I was reminded when Ellie was talking about post-grad, and all of you have been talking about maybe the history of the Dean's Service Award and the various funding opportunities that are on campus. We focus primarily on career opportunities in the social impact space, like things like development or philanthropy or working at a nonprofit or things like that. What we noticed was and we actually started this program with Dwight Hall before the Dean's Service Award. So I'm glad that the university stepped in, but it didn't solve all the problems. And so we still get more applications than we can fund. But there are a lot of, we do not do the actual placements, but we know that there are students who have maxed out. Either they've already used one of these Dean Services Awards, and I understand now that it's combined with the international one, you only get one through that particular program. And then you have to keep going back to places like Lisa Chapman and other people trying to find other ways. And I'm sure Ellie and Nick, you've done this to cobble things together. So this particular program with Dwight Hall, we step in, Dwight Hall manages and helps oversee the students with the mentoring and reflections every week and things like that. And we help provide extra alumni informal support. And honestly, if people need help with housing, if they get stuck and they need, dinner, when we could travel, I would go down and take the students out and things like that. And the fellowship also applies now to post-grad. So we thought it was important that there are people, students who maybe have a Fulbright or have graduate school, but it doesn't start to the fall. Maybe they're doing a research project or something, and it doesn't fit squarely into some of these prestigious fellowships that probably get a lot of attention at school. And so we thought it was important to expand our pool, and there still is a great need for alumni who want to know this. It's not just the summers, it's continuing work they want to do. And our goal is to make sure that students who want to be in the social impact sector, where you're going to be making $10,000, $13,000 a year, that's your particular financial situation shouldn't thwart you off the path that you want to do. So that's just the particular role that YANA Dwight Hall does. And we find the same as much as anybody else, but we know that that's not enough, and we hope to be able to fund more. So thanks for giving me a few seconds.
And
Thanks,
I
Rachel.
also want to make an important note about YANA. We are not an exclusive Yale affiliated organization. Anyone who cares, just like Lisa said, we welcome anything that you have. I'm also a recent grad, just not as recent as the other two. And I would have loved to have contact with someone much earlier than I made contact with YANA to help me figure out how to navigate entering your career in the social impact space. That was something that I didn't feel well versed or resourced on, and I could have used a mentor that said, hey, like, I've done this thing. This is kind of how I did it. What are you thinking about? And I do not want to forget to talk about the financial literacy and long-term planning piece that was omitted from so many of our experiences. For me, I knew I wanted to go into the nonprofit space that doesn't usually pay a lot, but no one talked to me about the things that Ellie was talking about. When you start renting your apartment, how do you also budget for all these other things that are expenses? And that may be the sort of thing that you can talk about, whether you come from a similar background to the types of students that we're talking about or not.
Thanks, Liana. So with that, I just want to give a big thank you to our panelists for sharing, their experiences and their sort of leadership in this area with us and with me. It's been a pleasure to hear from you. I want to turn it over now to the audience for those of you who are here, and see if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists. I see there are a few questions already in the chat, so you can just drop them there, or I guess in the Q&A, and then I'll direct them as appropriate. But one question that I have here is from Peter Pettit, if I've pronounced that right, who says, for Ms. Dupler, though I actually believe this sort of a variation of this question could be applied to Nick as well. He says, I believe I read an article on you and your career path in your local Michigan newspaper. Sounds plausible. Do you think you are influencing students back in your hometown?
Yeah, I believe that you did read an article. It's always funny to think about, like, people out there in the world reading about you when these like small town things, especially, you just think like nobody reads this, but I guess somebody does. And so that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I definitely do I try to stay in touch with people from my hometown who may have kids who are, coming of college age and thinking about applying to schools. I try to encourage everyone that I can, who's from my background, to apply to schools like Yale, because I think often there's this misconception that like a school like Yale is really financially out of reach, whereas a school like Michigan State might be like more financially in reach, when the reality, like with financial aid, is often that like a school like Yale is cheaper. And so I do like college prep, mentoring and stuff to students who are kind of in the position I was in, 10 or so years ago. And I do hope, I think more broadly, that I can be kind of an example to people, as I think we all probably hope. Yeah.
Thanks, Ellie. One point I really want to highlight that Ellie made that's sort of counterintuitive is that it's usually cheaper if you get into a place like Yale to go there than to less select or even very selective state universities. Most people don't know that, but it's true. Anyway, and that's a big friction. So a question we had from James Stein is, I may have missed this. I don't think you did. But is there a component of FGLI that encourages FGLI students to be mentors to other undergrads, first or second year students, or to work in a position that would help address lack of access in communities like the ones where they grew up? I don't know, it's a good question. I turn to my panelists.
Nick, do you want to answer that? Because that's in your recommendation to the report you did for us about a peer-to-peer.
Yes, I do. The screen has, yeah, I think my connection's a little weak. I did want to jump in, but I was afraid connection wise. So let me know if you can't hear me or not. But yeah, that was actually one of the recommendations I think that could be improved at Yale, is having a formal peer mentorship program. And I think part of what, I think Ellie spoke to this really well, part of what I benefited most from in FSY was we had counselors who were 2 years above us. And so hearing from them and hearing about their experiences, how to navigate things like shopping period, which is always crazy, how to apply for internships, how to look for jobs, all of those important things, I think are uniquely answered by current. That's something I think that should be, I think, strengthened.
So James Stein, not only.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
And
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nick. I was just, I thought you were done. You're breaking up a little bit, so I'll jump in here. But not only did James Stein not miss it, he identified a crucial need in sort of service provision. So very attentive. Michael Watson, actually, let me answer that question next. So Tim Schell asks, if you went back, what would you advise the middle and high schools you attended to adjust in order to better prepare students for higher education, including for highly selective institutions like Yale? That's a good question.
Well, I'll jump in. What a lot of schools do, a lot of high schools do in middle school, is they prepare the students for college. It's all about getting into college. It's not about what you do once you get to college, but that's the strategy. So I think in terms of more leadership development, more extracurricular, more play, more creativity, more teamwork together, all those personal skills help you become a stronger student and a better student. And when you go to college, you're more prepared. So I think for the professionals in middle school and high school who are the college guidance counselors, it shouldn't just be about college. It should be what choices you make while you're in those schools to help your community, do community service, do volunteer work, expose yourself to lots of different kinds of people. Raise your hand when no one else in the room is raising their hand, and find out where you can have leadership opportunities, starting at the bottom, working your way up, running a club, a group. All those are really important skills that I think that will make students better off.
Thanks, Liz. So the question that I have now from Michael Watson, which is, is what parting advice would you give current or future first generation students to get the most out of their college experience, which I think is potentially a good question to end on. So let's go with that one.
Is that for the most recent students only?
I think I think anyone who feels like they have good advice should feel free to take it, because good advice is at a high premium in my experience.
Well, I'll jump in first. I would say something that would be the most helpful is ask for the help that you need and take the initiative to find resources as early as you can. I think a lot of students sit with the feeling of not knowing why they don't feel like they belong on campus, or don't know why they feel like it's hard when no one else does. I think they keep a lot of that in too often. And I think there is an increasing amount of resources, as you can see, available, but it really takes some guts to take the initiative to seek those out and to admit that you need help. And that's okay. And that will really help you be able to take advantage of all of the experience that you want to have during your higher education.
Thanks, Liana.
I guess I'll jump in next. I think the best advice is to know you're not alone. And as Leanna was saying, many people like yourself have gone through or are going through the same experiences you're feeling. As Nick said earlier, the imposter syndrome, we all have that. I don't belong here. I don't feel comfortable here. Talk it out. You're not alone. And there are lots of resources at Yale and throughout this country where all the rest of the audience are located. And so just know that. I think my last tip would be for students to start building now your personal board of directors. Start with all of us on it. Email us, call us, ask us questions, and keep a running list of people who you meet, who are helpful to you, who may be in a career you may be interested in. You call them up and say, are you free for a 10-minute chat? Can I talk to you about what you do in your job? Or someone who's in a volunteer position, how do I get involved with YANA? And you contact Rachel Littman. Reach out to people, but start collecting those names and numbers and emails now as you meet people throughout, and you will find people love to help. Just ask, and count us in.
I'll jump in next. I think these are great pieces of advice. I think one that maybe we don't hear as often is that time actually might be one of our biggest resources. There's so much pressure to cram in things into this 4-year process that I think we need, like, time, yeah, is a wonderful resource in that as semesters pass by, you're going to feel more comfortable. And so in the moment when you first get to campus, or you're feeling lost and you're feeling alone, like, things will come. And I think another part that I didn't touch on that I'll just touch on really quickly is I took a gap year this past year, and a lot of my friends who are also FGLI students took some time off as well, either last year or throughout their time at Yale. And having some time away and to sort of really think and reflect on how you want to make the most of your time at Yale is something that I know a lot of people don't necessarily take advantage of, but it's totally possible. And being limited to a 4-year experience at college is not something that has to be for everyone. And for a lot of people it works. But there's always time, and there's always, that's a huge resource at your disposal.
Thanks, Nick. Ellie, any advice to offer?
Yeah, I think kind of a sad truth of the first gen experience at schools like this is that you're going to have to be a lot more proactive than, some of your peers who grew up kind of, building this whole like knowledge base about how this like elite education and job network, works. And you are just beginning that journey when you get to a school like Yale. And so I think like being proactive, I think as Lee said about, reaching out to alums and saying, do you have, a few minutes to talk about like XYZ thing, but also like really, spending time researching what resources are out there to kind of help you along in your journey. Like for me, by my second year at Yale, I knew that I wanted to go to law school. And then I was like, how much is law school? I look it up and it's like, oh, $300,000 or something, and I'm like, wow, that's like more money than my family has made like their entire lives. And like, how would I ever pay for something like that? And, because I started thinking about that a little earlier, I had time to, think about how I was going to fund that goal and to apply for, scholarships and to, I guess just prepare in a variety of ways. And so I think the sooner you can kind of start to think about these like longer term objectives that you might have and take the steps required to really research what it takes to get there, like that will really benefit you.
Thanks, Ellie. I'll just conclude by offering really the one piece of advice that I'm qualified to offer here, which is that, professors may in some cases seem intimidating. They're usually, in fact, aren't. So you shouldn't be too scared to talk to them. And even if you find that some of them, in fact, don't respond well, that doesn't really generalize. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that resource, which is hopefully one of the good things that Yale offers, in addition to the alumni and your peers. Okay, so thanks again so much to our panelists, to Michael for organizing, to Rachel, to the audience for your questions. It's been a real pleasure for me to moderate this. I don't know if anyone else has closing remarks here, but if not, then I'll just say thank you to everybody and all the best.
My only remaining closing remark is that I would be happy to talk to anybody in the audience who wants to talk, either, alums or current students. I can drop my email in the chat. I don't know if the emails or like panelist contact info is already up somewhere, but if not, I can put it in the chat.
We'll be sure to share all of that information afterwards.
Great.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.